Good morning, and welcome to the American Alliance of Museums 116th Annual Meeting at MuseumExpo. Every community owes its existence to generations from around the world who contributed their hopes, dreams, and energy to making the history that led to this moment. Some were brought here against their will. Some were drawn to leave their distant homes in hopes of better lives. Some were forced from their homelands, and some have lived on this land for more generations than can be counted. Honoring truth is essential to building a just and equitable world. While acknowledgement is important, it is only a beginning. We acknowledge the Piscataway people, on whose ancestral lands the American Alliance of Museums office and Baltimore, the city we celebrate during this annual meeting, are located. Please take a moment to consider the many realities of violence, displacement, migration, and colonization as we gather together for the 2024 AAM Annual Meeting at MuseumExpo. We must hold ourselves accountable for the necessary work to uncover truths in the museum field and beyond. And now, a special word from ERCO Lighting, the generous sponsor of this morning's general session.
Good morning, and on behalf of ERCO Lighting, I'd like to welcome you to the 2024 AAM Annual Meeting at MuseumExpo. For the third year in a row, I have the pleasure of speaking to you during the opening session, while you are probably tired of seeing me. There are many ways to interpret this year's theme, and I'd like to take a moment now to show you ERCO's. I realize that for many, light is not the first thing drawing in a visitor. It is the works of art, the exhibition planning, and curatorial story. For the cradle of aviation, it is the history of flight made hyper-local. But after 2 decades, the museum was facing many of the same challenges as you. Aging equipment, a growing collection, evolving expectations, and a reduced visitor experience. But when this museum decided to invest, they looked at the lighting to reinvigorate their exhibits and experiences. It is light that helps to interpret space, make them perceptible and possible to experience. For this, the museum now uses light in a bold, scenographic approach to transport visitors to a different time and place. Whether studying the earliest aviators or seeing one of 3 remaining original lunar modules, light from ERCO has created a new visitor experience. Within the museum, light has many parts to play: visibility, storytelling, conservation, and more. The visitor experience role connects the museum to the community. Whether a plane, lunar module, or painting, light by ERCO means not sacrificing. It is for this that light is part of thriving museums, healthy communities. We invite you to visit with the ERCO team in booth 4614 in the MuseumExpo and join me for a presentation on Friday for the changing nature of light and conservation. I look forward to connecting and hope you enjoy the conference.
Please join us in welcoming Jorge Zamanillo, Chair of the AAM Board of Directors.
Good morning. Buenos dias. I'm so thrilled to welcome you all to the American Alliance of Museums annual meeting at MuseumExpo, back in Baltimore for the first time in over a decade. Let me start by sharing our deepest gratitude to the co-chairs of our local host committee, Usman Naeem of the Baltimore Museum of Art, Susan Magsamen of the International Arts and Mind Lab at the Center for Applied Neuroaesthetics at Johns Hopkins University. Thank you. Join me in a round of applause for both of them, and all the incredible volunteers for the Baltimore community for all they have done to welcome us to this great city and plan for such an incredible experience for all of you. Thank you. On behalf of the AAM staff and board of directors, I also want to extend my deepest and sincerest gratitude to each of you in this room for joining us here in Baltimore for the next few days of learning, inspiration, and connection with each other. Thank you for being here. Yesterday evening, we had a special ceremony to honor the individuals, programs, and institutions recognized this year by the AAM Board of Directors for their leadership and excellence within the museum field. These honorees include some of the most promising rising stars in the field, as well as those who have had a significant impact in careers spanning many decades. They also include those whose work is breaking new ground and moving the field forward in ways that can inspire us all. I want to take a moment this morning to recognize all those honored this year. Please hold your applause while I announce all the names in each category. Receiving the 2024 Nancy Hanks Memorial Awards for Rising Stars are Amber Angeloni of the Cumber Museum, Robert Chavez of the American Museum of Natural History, Andre Lujan of Texas Through Time, Tamara Maxey of the Gold Nugget Museum, and Chris Moorhead of the Indianapolis Museum of Art at Newfields, Miguel Orellana of the Natural History Museums of Los Angeles County, Joshua Ramirez of the J. Paul Getty Museum, K.T. Todd of the Children's Museum of Pittsburgh, and Stephen White of the Center for Science and Industry. Let's hear it for these 9 inspiring rising stars. Receiving recognition for advancing diversity, equity, accessibility, and inclusion in the museum field are the following individuals, programs, and museums. Jenny Martin of the Children's Discovery Museum of San Jose, Kazette Solomon of the Museum of Art, RISD, from the Center of Science and Industry, the program The Color of Science, from the Boston Children's Museum, the exhibit You, Me, We, from the Smithsonian American Art Museum, the Jordan Schnitzer Museum of Art at the University of Oregon, the Boise Art Museum, the Utah Museum of Fine Arts, the Whatcom Museum, and with support from the Art Bridges Foundation, the exhibition Many West, Artists Shape an American Idea, and the First Americans Museum in Oklahoma. Let's have a round of applause for all these incredible honorees. You can find more information about the Nancy Hanks awardees and those recognized for excellence in DEAI on our website. I now have the honor of announcing 2 additional prestigious awards that were handed out yesterday. The AAM Award for Distinguished Service to Museums is presented annually by the AAM Board of Directors to an individual who has made a significant impact on the museum profession for over a career of at least 20 years, and who exemplifies the leadership and service to which this field aspires. This year, the board was delighted to present the award to Dr. Douglas Jones, Director of the AAM-accredited Florida Museum of Natural History. Doug's career at the museum has spanned nearly 40 years, including over a quarter century of service as director, making him the longest-serving director of any major natural history museum in the United States. Doug has devoted his career to creating a better future by inspiring young people to care about science, our environment, by training the next generation of researchers and museum professionals, and by working to ensure that our planet is here for future generations to enjoy. Doug has graciously prepared a video for us to share with you today. Let's take a listen.
Good morning, friends and colleagues. What an unexpected honor to receive the AAM Award for Distinguished Service to Museums. I'm both thrilled and humbled by this recognition. Thrilled because I never in a million years expected this, and because it says to me that years working in several museum organizations didn't go unnoticed, but had a positive impact on those organizations and the people they serve. Humbled because when I look over the list of previous recipients, people I've admired like Stephen Weil, Peter Raven, Elaine Gurian, and Janetta Cole, I'm suddenly overcome with a case of imposter syndrome. And if I'm honest, my life has been enriched in a greater measure by the wonderful people I've met along the way versus any service to the field that I've contributed. I want to thank the current AAM Board of Directors, Jorge Zamanillo and company, for this award. It means a great deal to me that you would select me for this honor. I also want to acknowledge and thank the many museum friends I was able to accession into my personal friends collection over the years, who are very influential in my career, including friends in the Florida Association of Museums, especially Executive Director Melinda Horton, friends in the Association of Science Museum Directors, especially Executive Director Bonnie Stiles, and of course the many friends on the AAM board and in executive leadership, including Ford Bell, Laura Lott, Brooke Leonard and Kaywin Feldman, and most recently, friends on the ASTC board and its CEO, Christopher Nelson. And last but not least, thanks to my fabulous staff at the Florida Museum of Natural History, including my nominator, Bruce McFadden. So stay the course, everyone. Ensure that museums remain vital, relevant, and thriving. Thank you.
Congratulations on this well-deserved recognition, Doug. It was a true honor for me to have the opportunity to hand out the Chair's Leadership Award this year. This award is reserved for rare occasions to honor outstanding leadership and extraordinary accomplishments in the museum field. So rare, in fact, that it has only been given out 3 times in the past. This year, we recognize a trailblazing leader, Carlos Tortoledo, and the National Museum of Mexican Art for their lasting impact in the Chicago area and around the country. Carlos founded the museum in 1982 as a community-focused institution dedicated to social justice, education, and accessibility. Under Carlos' leadership, the museum became one of the most prominent first-voice institutions for Mexican art and culture in the United States, home to one of the country's largest Mexican art collections and the first Latino museum accredited by AAM. Throughout his 4 decades in the museum field, Carlos served as a powerful advocate for change, calling out racism, inequities, and barriers to access. Though Carlos retired last year, the National Museum of Mexican Art will continue to serve as a model for other institutions for years to come. Carlos has also prepared a video to acknowledge this moment.
Hi, I'm Carlos Tortoledo, President and founder of the National Museum of Mexican Art. I am a former Chicago Public High School teacher, and in 1982, I invited 5 of my colleagues, all teachers, to join with me to help create a museum. The museum is located in the Pilsen community of predominantly Mexican working class community. I've always believed that the museum should be a part of the community, not apart from the community. From the onset, I want to do what museums traditionally do, which is have great exhibitions, have a great collection, and also do educational programming. But at the same time, I thought museums can do more, should do more, and must do more. So we do things like during COVID, we had testing, we had vaccinations, we do a lot of health things. We work a lot with the LGBTQ community. Our after-school youth program, Yo Locali, has won 2 White House Awards, the only one in the country to do so. We do a lot of performing arts events, and we see the museum also as a community center. I want to thank Jorge Zamanillo and the entire AAM board for this award, and I need to thank the tremendous board and staff we have at the museum. Thank you.
Congratulations again to Carlos Tortoledo and the National Museum of Mexican Art. And thank you for all you have done for the museum field, Carlos. Gracias. Just last month, the AAM Board of Directors was delighted to announce an exciting new chapter in the organization's 118-year history with the appointment of Marilyn Jackson as AAM's new president and CEO. Marilyn is an accomplished and strategic executive, a passionate advocate for education, and a visionary thinker who brings a unique combination of museum, nonprofit, higher education, foundation, and organizational experience. We know that she will continue to build upon AAM's strong foundation to lead the organization to great successes in the years ahead. The board and I can't wait for you to get to know Marilyn as she embarks on a year of listening and learning. Please join me in congratulating her, and for the first time as AAM's president and CEO, please welcome to the stage Marilyn Jackson.
Good morning, and welcome to the 116th American Alliance of Museums annual meeting and MuseumExpo. I'm Marilyn Jackson, the newly minted president and CEO of AAM, a phenomenal organization that is dedicated to you, the institutions we work in, and the companies, funders, and vendors who help make the magic happen. I started in this role in April, and I have received the most amazing welcome from our community. You all sent flowers and cards and sweets and blew up my LinkedIn, and I really have tried my very best to connect with all of you. So if I missed you, please send me another message so that we can all stay connected in this journey. I'm so excited to be here, and I thank you for really making me feel so welcome. We all know that museums can foster wellness in society, which is why wellness is the theme of this year's conference. Research is reaffirming our belief in the healing power of our work. Neuroscience researchers at the Johns Hopkins International Arts and Minds Lab have demonstrated that arts and cultural organizations such as museums improve physical and mental health, enhance disease prevention and recovery, promote brain development in children, build more equitable communities, and foster well-being. And wellness, looks different for everyone. It means mental and physical health. It means emotional well-being and trauma recovery. It develops the capacity for resilience. It means opening our minds and our hearts and giving grace during challenging times. And so when we talk about wellness for our visitors, our communities, and our society, we can't forget about wellness for you and your colleagues. I want to take a moment to acknowledge that there's a lot going on in the world right now, and many of us are experiencing heartache due to natural disasters, wars, violence, and the collapse of the Key Bridge here in Baltimore. Over the next few days, as we connect and learn from one another, please make time to care for yourselves. Our meetings team at AAM has created wellness and self-care lounges so that you can make space for yourself, recharge and rejuvenate, and we can show one another the kind of empathy and compassion that museums pride themselves on. Well, I want to take a moment to share a little bit about myself and my passion for the field. I grew up in the Flatbush section of Brooklyn, New York, and my mother was an educator who started her teaching career working with families who were first-generation immigrants from Puerto Rico and the Dominican Republic. And as an immigrant herself, my mother, from Jamaica, my mother understood the importance of literature for young students to find themselves in this new land and develop their own authentic voice. She also understood the power of museums to educate, inspire, connect, and transform. So my brothers and I, we grew up in gardens and museums, historical houses, and we even went to living museums. And we visited places like the Brooklyn Children's Museum, the American Museum of Natural History, the Brooklyn Museum, and one of my mom's very favorites was the Cloisters, where we spent many Sunday afternoons. My parents, they didn't camp, we didn't explore nature, we didn't go to national parks, we didn't hike other than to the subway station, and other than our annual trip to Jamaica to visit our grandparents, we didn't travel, but museum visits were our excursions and our adventures. They introduced us to new spaces and places. They transformed the things we read about in books into real life. These experiences, they transported us to ancient times, but also made us think about the future and who we wanted to be. As a high school student, I fell in love with the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and I took full advantage of the suggested donation on days when I needed a restorative break from the trials and tribulations of a very overcrowded public high school. I went on to college and I studied biology and sociology, and it was during my first postgraduate job as a database manager where I learned that I had a knack and a passion for marketing. That led to business school and nearly a decade in corporate marketing. But it was when I had returned to Chicago from a couple of years in California that I got a call asking if I was interested in working at the Museum of Science and Industry. Despite my childhood in all these wonderful museums and gardens, the idea of working at a museum never occurred to me. I honestly had never seen or met a museum professional who was a person of color. I had no idea what to expect, and I had 3 kids under 6, and the museum was a mile from my house, so I thought, hey, I threw caution to the wind, and after a very rigorous and very long interview process, I landed the job. And I loved it. I loved the collaboration with the exhibit and design department. I enjoyed working with education and visitor services on developing guest experiences. I met some of the most creative and most ingenious people I've ever known. And it was here that I first experienced what AAM could do for my museum. Each year, we eagerly awaited for our teams to come back from the annual meeting with the newest innovations, technology, exhibitions, and approaches. They brought new ideas that would shape our offerings for years to come. I spent 6 years at the Museum of Science and Industry, where I opened 4 permanent exhibits, more than 16 temporary exhibits, led a complete rebrand, and helped launch a capital campaign. My next stop was the Chicago Architecture Center, a place that leverages more than 400 volunteer docents to educate more than 600,000 guests a year through tours, programs, and an annual architecture festival. This is where I learned the power and reward in volunteerism. And AAM understands the importance of a robust volunteer corps, which is why we are investing $1 million in our museum community. And one of the focuses is on developing an inclusive volunteer program. Since that announcement, the Alliance has expanded opportunities to get involved. So whether you want to help advocate for museums, contribute to thought leadership, or grow opportunities for connection among your peers, we have ways for you to engage. After 6 years at the Chicago Architecture Center, I joined United Way of Metro Chicago, where we worked to build stronger Chicago region. But I couldn't stay away from the museum field for long, and after a 2-year pandemic and setting up COVID response funds for the city of Chicago and the state of Illinois, I was drawn back to the sector to run the Muhammad Ali Center in Louisville, Kentucky. The center mobilizes the legacy of one man, an American icon, a global icon, in ways that inspire, transform, and empower, especially empower young people. I started the center in early 2022, a really scary and financially uncertain time for museums. The 2009 economic stimulus bill taught us that financial relief from the federal government was not a given for museums. So when the pandemic hit, AAM leveraged its decades of advocacy work and invested over 1,600 hours to fight for pandemic funding for museums. The team's effort resulted in nearly 1,000 local, national, and international and digital print radio placements, leading to $3 billion in funding. This crucial funding ensured institutions like the Muhammad Ali Center and possibly many of yours stayed afloat and reopened. And with more than 14 years of direct experience in institutions like yours, I understand how very, very challenging this work can be, but I also know how very rewarding it can be. I'm so passionate about museums and their impact on our communities, which is why I was excited to come to the Alliance to leverage my experience to galvanize, connect, and strengthen our museum community. I've been in this position for just 4 weeks, and I found a team at AAM that is fully committed to this field. I have truly been awed by their level of passion and care and belief in the power of museum professionals to change the world. In fact, many of them, like many of you, have dedicated their entire careers to the field, and I'd like to take a moment to recognize just a few of our team members. Dean Faylis recently celebrated his 30th anniversary with AAM. Shalon Atwater, her 31st year. And Carol Constantine is celebrating her 45th anniversary with this organization. AAM is more than one annual conference. This organization has been around for more than 100 years and has continued to evolve and change to reflect your needs. The Alliance is here to support you as professionals by fostering collaboration, creating learning opportunities, and providing the type of professional development you told us you want and that you need. AAM is a reflection of your values, your challenges, and your opportunities. And I truly believe that AAM is you, and you are AAM. And I want to share some highlights of what we have accomplished over the past year. Last year, we launched the Future of Museums Summit, a 2-day virtual convening to help museum professionals anticipate the changing landscape and develop strategies to prepare your museums for the future. So mark your calendar for October 29th and 30th for the second year of this incredible event. And this year, the summit has an open call for speakers, so don't be shy. Submit your proposals and your ideas. The team has also redesigned your member resource library with new functions to help you find the resources you need and the inspiration you want when you want it. So you can browse over 2,000 articles, tip sheets, guides, and on-demand programs. And this year, we've included 20 new programs covering topics from financial sustainability and accessibility practices to measuring social impact and managing effective volunteer programs. Each year, we conduct several research projects, and we just released the updated Museum Board Leadership Report. Last conducted in 2017, the new report aims to support museum directors and boards in assessing and addressing challenges around diversity, culture, and finance. I won't go into all the details here, but to learn more, join a debrief session tomorrow afternoon at 2:20 with our research partner, Slover Lynette, and the sponsor of the report, Northern Trust. Volunteers have told us time and again how their services help them develop and grow personal connections, enhance their job prospects, and demonstrate leadership. We're working to build a comprehensive and inclusive volunteer program to support the hundreds of members who are currently volunteering and those who want to raise their hands and join us. There are so many ways to get involved. You can moderate one of the new online museum communities, you could write an article for a blog or for the museum magazine, or you can serve as a peer reviewer for our museum assessment program or the accreditation program. AAM has also creates important networking and connection opportunities. Year-round, you can connect with colleagues in 20 peer communities on Museum Junction to share advice and resources. And last year, our online community added 17 new peer communities, and the engagement has grown nearly 20%. So while you're here, think about how you can get more involved. For those of you who are not official AAM members, now is the perfect time to join. And over the next few months, I'll be hitting the road and the Zoom rooms to hear directly from you about the issues that are important to you. Feel free to reach out to me. I'm really eager to listen and collaborate with you as we begin to shape our next strategic plan, which will launch in 2025. Our team works hard to support you, but we're only as strong as you, and we can't do the work without you. As an alliance, we make our museums thrive, and I'm excited to be here. It is an honor and a privilege to serve this organization and all of you, so thank you. Now, thank you. Now, before I head off stage, I want to recognize that this convening would not be possible without the support of so many people. We want to thank the Baltimore community and our local host committee, the convention center staff, the AAM team, our exhibitors, sponsors, speakers, volunteers, and every single one of you for joining us. Up next, we have an incredible keynote panel with 4 spectacular panelists who know well the power of our sector to impact individuals, communities, and societies. Our keynote is made possible thanks to our generous sponsors at .art who share this message.
Last year in Denver, the .art Registry gave a standing room only presentation on art therapy in museums in support of our charitable art therapy initiative. And this year, the theme of this AAM meeting is Thriving Museums, Healthy Communities. At .art, we believe strongly in the role art can play in our mental health and wellness, and we invite you to experience art with wellness in mind by visiting our art therapy boards in the hallway, powered by our ID.art platform. Please join us today at 1:30 p.m. in Solutions Theater 2 for the premiere of a short film, The Healing Powers of Art, and to learn more about the therapeutic benefits of art in museums and communities.
I strongly believe in the healing powers of art.
The healing powers.
The healing power.
Healing power.
Healing power. Healing powers of art.
I really enjoy and I really believe in the
healing power of art.
And now, please join us in welcoming to the stage the moderator for our esteemed keynote panel, Susan Magsamen.
Well, good morning. It's really a pleasure to be here. And I just want to say, welcome to Baltimore. I'm a Baltimore girl, and I'm so happy that you're here. It's a great town. It's a really great town, and it's really wonderful to have you here. So I'm going to talk for a couple minutes, and then I'm going to invite our amazing panel up. And to really begin to get us started, I want to just share a couple of comments with you. First of all, AAM has been an amazing community. I have loved being part of the host committee. And the truth of the matter is that I love museums and cultural institutions in all of your beautiful forms. In many ways, I think that museums and cultural arts organizations literally brought me up and shaped me. And so I feel like for so many reasons, this gathering for me is like coming home. From you, I have learned compassion and empathy, inclusion, creativity, and the importance of connection. So I truly want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. So it took my co-author and I, Ivy Ross, 4 years to write the book, Your Brain on Art. And the goal was really simple. It was to share what I consider to be shovel-ready science about the way the arts can help us heal. And in just 6 days, the book became a New York Times bestseller, which blew me away. Thank you. I mean, these are the kinds of things that you don't think about when you're growing up. And we got a phone call from our publisher, and I said to my co-author, this is either really good news or really bad news. And so we are now in our 11th printing, and we are in over a dozen countries around the world, which is really spectacular. And since the book has come out, we've heard from people around the world that have basically said 3 things. The first is that the book validates what they already knew about the power of the arts in their lives. Secondly, that the book has given them permission to be more creative and more curious and more alive. And then the third is that the book has put words to what they already knew. I believe that the book has been so resonant because the world is really hungry for better solutions for our families, for our communities, and for ourselves. So the book makes a bold claim. We are standing on the verge of a cultural shift in where the arts and culture and aesthetic experience can deliver potent, accessible, and proven health and well-being and learning solutions to billions of people. And in writing the book, we had an opportunity to talk with many indigenous cultures, and we learned that there are still over 5,000 tribes around the world. Many of these groups don't have a word for the art because it's how they live their lives. And I think that's super important. This petroglyph is believed to be 226,000 years old. And if you look at it carefully, you can see these really beautiful impressions of hands and different size hands. And these are still the same tools that we use today to create our world. So, we humans have been both makers and beholders since the beginning of time. And in writing the book, I had an opportunity to meet with evolutionary biologist E.O. Wilson, who was at Harvard. And he made the point that these experiences are the gateway to transformation and transcendence, and that they're essential for the human species to have evolved. But the only way that we can experience arts and aesthetic experiences is through our senses, the way we bring the world into our bodies. And so just a couple of sort of, I think, amazing things about the way our bodies bring the world in is you visually will process over 34,000 different pieces of information in an hour. Each of your fingertips have over 3,000 touch receptors that are automatically bringing sensory information into your thalamus and your somatosensory cortex and transmitting a cascade of neurotransmitters that help you know how you feel and how you want to respond in the world. Your nose can detect 1 trillion odors, and you have 400 scent receptors. You literally can smell better than a dog, and I think that's really important takeaway. And sound resonates because we're 60% water in just 3 milliseconds. So when you think about these songs that are the autobiographical playlists of your life, in just 3 seconds, you know that song. And researchers are now beginning to understand that we have new senses and maybe as many as 50 new ways to both process information and to be able to make sense of the world. So in the simplest terms, I define arts and culture as creative expression. And I describe aesthetic experiences as the places and spaces and things that impact us. So it's no surprise to, I think, any of us that nature is the ultimate aesthetic art form. And that's because nature is our nature. We lived in nature for 99.8% of our human existence. So what's really wonderful where we sit today is that science is now proving that we are physiologically and neurobiologically wired for the arts. And it's only been in the last 25 years that technology and science has allowed us to get inside our brains non-invasively to really be able to understand how arts and aesthetic experiences really change us. So this field of neuroaesthetics, the definition for this field is the study of how arts and aesthetic experiences measurably change our brains, bodies, and behavior. And really importantly, how this information gets translated into practices for our physical health, our mental health, well-being, learning, community development, and so much more. The field is called neuroarts, and we'll talk a bit more about that today. So I love this slide. When we began to start to think deeply about neuroaesthetics and neuroarts, we knew it was going to be different from the way traditional science is studied. You cannot reduce the arts to a single cell or even a biological system, but we needed a framework to be able to study it. So this is what I call ways of knowing. And it's really essential that we honor indigenous lived experiences, artistic and academic knowledge. So very much I see this field as a round table, not a hierarchy where there is prominence in certain art forms or certain even scientific disciplines. So what we do know is that, and this is I think extraordinarily, that these arts and aesthetic experiences simultaneously alter a complex physiological network of interconnected neurological and biological systems. And this is from your respiratory system to your circulatory system to higher order brain function, but also to things like your muscular system. So what's fascinating about the way arts and aesthetic experiences work, like nothing else, is that we are constantly making these physiological and neural connections, regardless of the art form, regardless of the aesthetic experiences. And so I think what's really also valuable to talk about here is that, as I said, we learn and we bring the world in through our senses. But these senses connect, these systems connect through a process called neuroplasticity. So just to put this in context, each of us have about 100 billion neurons, and these neurons connect at a synaptic level, and you can see a bit of this in this video. There are quadrillions connections in your head that create many, many, many neural pathways that connect all the different systems in your brain. So as you are actually bringing in the world, you're creating these synaptic connections, creating these neural pathways, and these pathways underlie everything you do. Your body movement, your memory, your emotions, the way you recall information. They're absolutely essential to how your bodies grow and change and how we make changes in the world. So NeuroArts is now being deployed in literally every sector of society. And this just gives you a bit of information. But whether we're talking about business community, museums, arts organizations, whether we're thinking about healthcare or public health, the arts and neuroaesthetics are showing up everywhere. The science is helping to inform solutions that we can really use to make a real difference in some of the issues in the world. And that's important because, as we've just heard, we are facing so many intractable problems that current tools and techniques and approaches have not been able to solve. And in many ways, I think, the elephant in the room is very similar to the arts. They're ancient, they're powerful. Depending upon where you touch them, you get a different perspective, you get a different solution. And I think the cautionary tale is that if we don't protect the arts in our culture, we could lose them. So I want to just speak for a moment about a project that I've been working on with the Aspen Institute. About 4 years ago, we set out on a journey to really build the field of neuroarts. And our North Star is literally to ensure that arts and aesthetic experiences become part of mainstream medicine and public health in all sectors. And the blueprint includes also launching something called the NeuroArts Resource Center, which will launch this fall. And this is a global virtual watering hole where community practitioners, researchers, artists, museums, organizations, funders, all can come together in the same place as a learning community to find information and to share information. I'm also extremely proud to announce the Renée Fleming NeuroArts Investigator Award. Several weeks ago, we awarded 7 participants, interdisciplinary teams, to start to look more deeply at innovating and researching problems using neuroarts in the laboratory, but also in the community. And some of them are also happening in museum environments. And then the third program with the NeuroArts I wanted to share is something called the Community NeuroArts Coalitions. And these are hyper-local community groups that are coming together. We have 3 pilots right now. We'll be launching a toolkit in the fall that brings together museums, cultural organizations, educational resources, healthcare, policymakers within communities who are looking at how to solve problems in their local communities through the lens of neuroaesthetics. And museums, and I think it's really fair to say cultural centers, are at the heart of this effort. I talk a lot about this idea that art creates culture, culture creates community, and community creates humanity. Many of these institutions are already doing so much of this work. And recently, I had the opportunity to go out to Bentonville, Arkansas, to Crystal Bridges. And what amazed me was the way that this institution, in this relatively small community, is actually thinking about the way that a museum and a cultural organization can connect from pre-K all the way to pre-med. And so I think there's a lot that we can learn from each other in this learning community about how to tap into all of these different aspects of the way that this work is coming together. So in closing, I want to say that there are many, many organizations all over the world that are really using neuroarts and the work that we know about arts and health and the science of the arts to really address some of these intractable problems. AAM is at the lead, AARP, the Association of Children's Museums, NEA, who you'll hear from today, NIH, Health and Human Services, but also places like the World Bank and the World Health Organization. So today, I am extremely excited to be able to have a conversation with these extraordinary women who are also doing some great work to lead this field. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Maria Rosario Jackson, Chair of the National Endowment for the Arts, Terri Lee Freeman, Executive Director of the Lewis Museum, and Renée Fleming, acclaimed singer, 5-time Grammy Award winner, and also an extraordinary arts advocate.
Welcome, welcome.
Can everyone hear me? I have one of those voices where I ask everyone to move to the front row. So join us. So it's such a pleasure to have the three of you here today to talk about this work. Earlier we were talking in the green room and decided that we wanted you to envision that you are in our kitchen and that we are having a conversation with each other about some of the things that are happening in the world, and from our each unique perch, how we really might be able to start to sort of solve some of these problems through the lens of the arts. And so, Maria, I'd love to start with you. As the chair of the National Endowment for the Arts, you've been working on so many extraordinary projects. I'd love to hear a little bit about, through the lens of museums and cultural arts organizations, what are you thinking about these days?
Thank you for the question, and thank you for the invitation to be here. It's really wonderful to be with all of you. At the National Endowment for the Arts, I think so many of the things that you shared in your opening remarks are influencing how we show up. And, I come at this from an interesting background. So my training is in urban planning. And I think about, and my work over the course of my career has focused on how do we build healthy communities where all people can thrive. And I think that the arts and museums are a critical element of what a healthy community requires. We're at a really particular moment in history where, as we come out of the pandemic and with so many other complex factors in our world and our lives, we really are summoned to set the foundation for the next version of the sector and the next version of our communities. And I think it's really important to figure out, what did we learn from the last few years when everyone was called to question their orthodoxies about how museums operate, how we run our lives, what work looks like. And there's something to be learned from that experience as we move forward. And it's also an environment where not only are we questioning orthodoxies, but we're also learning more about how the arts matter in our lives. And certainly, Susan, the work that you've been doing, the work that Renée has been doing, it's so critical in advancing our understanding of why institutions like museums are actually foundational to a healthy place. One of the things that I've witnessed and hopefully have contributed to in this role as chair of the National Endowment for the Arts is a much more expansive narrative about why the arts matter. I mean, what has been true for decades is that the default argument for why we should pay attention to the arts has been an economic impact argument. And to be sure, it's still an important argument. That said, I think one of the things that I'm experiencing in advancing what is a very robust arts integration agenda at the NEA is that we have interest from other parts of the federal family, and it's not just because of the economic impact. Mm-hmm. It's because of the role of the arts as it relates to healing individuals, healing communities, recognizing that the arts, which allow us to make sense of the world, to ask questions, to express our humanity, to see the humanity of others. I really believe that this is a precondition for all of the things that we say we aspire to as a nation of opportunity and justice. You can't get there without that arts integration. And what I'm finding is that there is an openness to that idea from a wide range of leaders, not just in the arts, but in education and health and human services and are stewards of our physical environment. There is an appreciation that I think didn't exist before about why the arts need to be integrated into our concepts of healthy communities.
It's interesting too, because I think, you know, artists and philosophers and children have always known the power of the arts, right? But in some ways we've marginalized them, we've sidelined them, we have been taught that productivity is really important, so we've been very transactional. And I've seen the way that the science of the arts has started to show that when you play a musical instrument, you certainly create connection, and you create empathy, and you create a sense of community. But you also change brain structure, and you build neuroplasticity. You create faster movement within the brain. You create resiliency. So for our young children to be losing that capability by not having access to the arts in schools is extraordinary. It's like taking a natural gift, something that we're wired for, and literally taking it away. And I think what you've been doing is really seeing how that shows up. And education is just one example. It's true in healthcare, it's true in business, it's true in under-resourced communities, that you've been able to see other departments within the federal government say, I need this for my workforce, I need this for innovation in environmental affairs, and you're seeing it show up everywhere. And I think that's really remarkable, that shift. But it takes time, right? It's an evolution.
Yeah, for sure. It takes time. There's, our structures aren't set up for the kinds of synergy that would be optimal. Mm-hmm. And I think building the structures that allow for the arts to be a normal component of how we plan neighborhoods, or how we think of medical solutions, or any number of the routine considerations that we have to have before us as we think of aspiring to healthy communities. Those mechanisms don't always exist, and the building of those mechanisms, having recognized that there's a demand for this kind of confluence, is really part of the work.
It's a movement, and it's also building a field. I think about it like exercise science, or nutrition science, or sleep science. There's now the science of the arts, where it is an equal footing to these other things of whole health, and building that understanding about what that really looks like, and how that gets propagated across all these different sectors.
Well, I mean, what's interesting is that the lens that one is able to apply with the kind of research that is now available about the role of the arts really does create a much more nuanced, rich, and complex way of understanding why it matters, right? So when I was early in my career, and I was committed to this integration of arts and culture in how we think of healthy places, I had very well-meaning colleagues that early on would say, why aren't you doing housing? Or why aren't you doing labor, or transportation, or something that looks more like urban planning? But I knew in my core that my work was about integrating arts and culture into concepts of community. And it took a while, but I often now, and for many years, have said that if you look around the world and throughout the ages in strategies to disempower, the first thing that is attacked is one's ability, or diminished or controlled, is one's ability to make sense of the world, to ask questions, to be expressive, to express your full humanity. These are the things that we do through the arts. And if it's so powerful that it has to be controlled, contained, taken away to diminish, then why don't we think of it as core to building up? So that's something I've been able to say for a while, but now you layer this science into understanding what the arts actually can help to deliver and what's at stake is even greater, right, without that. So I think there's an understanding that our democracy relies on people who can see each other's humanity and care for each other, be curious about each other, and that the arts are a pathway for that, an essential pathway.
And it's democratizing in and of itself.
Yes.
Yeah. Terri, I'd love to have you jump in at a local level. You are a museum, but you're so much more. Could you talk a bit about how that work is playing out in a very hyper-local way?
Sure. So and first of all, let me say good morning. I come to this work now serving as the president of the Reginald F. Lewis Museum of Maryland African American History and Culture. But I come to this work in 2014 as the president of the National Civil Rights Museum at a time when it felt as though a real attack and assault was taking place in this country on Black bodies. It started hundreds of years ago, but it seemed to be a continual refrain of abuses that we were seeing in communities against African American bodies. And so for me, the thinking of the museum was, well, this is great that we have this space with these beautiful exhibitions and this incredible interpretation, but our community needs a safe space. Our community needs a space where they can come in and exhale. And so I have carried that into the work at the Lewis Museum to say, yes, of course we collect, of course we interpret, of course we provide to you incredible exhibits that are art and culture and history. But we're also going to provide you with some programming that may be challenging. It may be, it all should be informative. It may be edutainment. It may be allowing you to create however you need to create. But what we're going to do is provide you, community, with what you need. We want you to come into the space and say, okay, I can go through the exhibits, but if I just want to stop and sit, I can just stop and sit. And it's really important in communities. You know, I'm a culturally specific museum. The majority of the folks that we serve are those communities that have been marginalized. And we tell the history specifically of African American communities here in Maryland. Maryland has a very interesting history. You all take a look at Maryland's history as being a border state and didn't know where we were. We had one foot in Confederacy and one foot in freedom. But it's an interesting state. It has continued to be an interesting state, and things play out, I think, in Maryland in very interesting ways. And so the people come into the museum saying, I want to learn, I want to see, I want to participate, but what I don't want to be is re-traumatized, right? I just want to be able to come and chill. And so as we expand on our traveling exhibitions, or as we make additions to our permanent exhibition, we do it with the thought of how can we make sure that people are learning, that they come in, they're challenged, they see things that are different, they're learning, but that we are not re-traumatizing. So an example of this is that we're getting ready to, in the fall, open an installation in our permanent gallery on the lynching history of Maryland. And it was really important that we wanted to tell the truth, and you can't tell the truth about lynching without talking about really traumatic experiences, but we didn't want to have people running out of the exhibition with their hair on fire. So to be able to focus less on the images, if you will, of those who were the victims, and talk more, frankly, about those people who made it a party atmosphere during the lynching was really important. Utilizing music, utilizing sound, utilizing lighting was really, really important. But to know the history is also important. And to help people understand that lynching from the perspective of individuals being hung from trees may not be common. There are all sorts of ways that people are lynched in this country today. And so we go on to talk about that. And that's a part of everything that we do, connecting history to what is current, but doing it in a way that is sensitive, yet informative, and relevant, and confirming the experiences of the people who are represented in
I think
the
that
space.
idea of validating, again, right, giving permission, validating, finding words for feelings, and knowing that you're not alone is another aspect of this. As you were talking, I was thinking about this idea of how one heals, how one grows, how one flourishes, and then how you are able to really move into the world in some form of transformation. And those are complex evolutions that we move through, and to have a space. I also know, as a white woman in Baltimore, the ability to be able to have the Lewis here is important for the entire community, because others are able to learn from what you're doing, and I think there's a very bi-directional opportunity there too for really coming together. And I think that's important for Baltimore, but I think it's also more important for the country than ever.
Yes,
So,
I would
thank you.
agree. And I just wanted to comment, because Carlos had mentioned early on the screen that they were a community center as well as a museum. And while we don't see ourselves as a community center, we do try to center community in the things that we do, because we can only exist if the community supports the museum. And so we want them to see it as a place where they are comfortable, they learn new things, and even if they are challenged, they're challenged in a very sensitive way.
Beautiful. Thank you. So Renée Fleming is here with us today. Renée is in the Hours in New York, and it's spectacular. I saw it first round, and she came down this morning just for this. So I just want to say thank you for coming.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you. It's a privilege to share the stage with you all. I love what I do, and I've been very thrilled to be able to do it for a long time. But I got interested in this work because as a singer, I also moved to the administration side, starting in Chicago for 10 years with Lyric Opera of Chicago. And I really felt that all of us are community service providers, whether it's a performing arts venue or a museum or healthcare. And that can't easily be replaced. We are all people serving people. And I noticed as well that donors typically were working in the arts and healthcare. But I needed help because I had difficulty with pain and performance pressure. They went hand in hand, and sometimes in a debilitating way that threatened my career. And so I kept trying to study about it. There wasn't a lot that medicine was saying at the time to help me. They were kind of denying even the mind-body connection way back when. And so then I noticed that researchers were studying music, and I thought, now why on earth would that be, scientific researchers? So when I met Dr. Francis Collins, who led the National Institutes of Health for 12 years, and asked him why, he said, the brain. He said, we have a brain institute, and music has more impact on every known part of the mapped area of the brain than other activities, and so that's why we're studying this, and because it can be measured. And this has been enormous, the fact that they're funding research now because they can use fMRI, EEG, and various measurements to kind of provide a rigor in research that can ultimately, hopefully, lead to creative arts therapies and therapists being licensed and therefore covered. So that's been a real passion of mine, and I love all of the arts. I call myself now the NeuroArts poster child because I tour constantly, and I'm touring a beautiful National Geographic project right now called Voice of Nature, the Anthropocene. We won a Grammy last year, and I said, let's take it on the road. And every small city I go to, and I love this kind of tour, I immediately look up parks and museums. And I enjoy it so much. My favorite recently was in Davis, California, where the Manetti Shrem Museum and also the Native American Museum nearby, and just have been kind of obsessed with both ever since. And I also am voraciously reading novels again. I am being outside. I am going to performances, of course, of every kind. I'm a theater buff. And I'm staying away from opinion news. And I recommend that all of you do that this year because it's a tough year. And it works. I'm so much happier and just more positive.
So true.
And I am still getting the news, but in a reduced form.
I want to back you up to the National Geographic Project for a second, because this is an amazing way to reignite our love of the planet and of nature. And so can you just share how this unpacks? It's in IMAX theaters, right? Has that been primarily where it's been?
That's a different project, but this is basically, I've discovered that multidisciplinary performing projects are much more effective. We want all of our senses to be activated, and hopefully at some point we will lose rows in theaters and replace them with tables and chairs, and so that we can have a shared experience with friends and family, or we can get up and move, which is something we all should be doing now. Everybody take a deep breath. I know I need one. Yes, and exhale, because I just felt that film would tell the story of the planet in a more meaningful way. I sing live to 30 minutes of various selections from the album, but also Lord of the Rings and Bjork and things that I've recorded but don't perform very much that are more popular. And the films are beautiful, and they mainly tell the story because we like you said, we want people to enjoy the experience, but still have the takeaway of action. In this case, loving and taking care of the planet. So it's mostly beautiful images that correspond loosely with the music, but some of it is also the Anthropocene, and we have not had a very positive effect on the planet. And so we have to tell that story as well. And National Geographic did a beautiful job, and they also talk about their sustainable practices. So I've loved that project. I've also been touring for 2 years now, one with George O'Keeffe's letters and also with her husband, and using a lot of images from the George O'Keeffe Museum in Santa Fe, and photographs and the story of her marriage. And people like to learn. My first experience actually was with museums myself was at the Tate Modern in London, and it was an exhibit on Paul Klee, and I did a brief performance of the music that he loved, and we wove that into a story about the artist. And I think these kinds of projects can really be illuminating for the public. I mean, even I noticed one of the thank you videos had strings playing in the background. Did anybody else get goosebumps and feel emotion and feel just a sense of, oh my gosh, it's wonderful what this man has done? And I stopped and I went, it's the music. I'm sure it is wonderful, but it does have a huge effect on us.
Yeah, it's really true. And what you're making me think about is this idea of mixed methods and multiple sensorial experiences within museums that really enliven the senses. There's a fantastic exhibit right now at the BMA for Joyce Scott, who is, I would have said at one moment she was a jewelry designer, but that doesn't do it. And I think that's the other point, is that we're so multidimensional, and oftentimes we bring people down to one level, one plane, and yet this exhibit is very dynamic. There's music, there's video, but there's also an opportunity to do weavings, and there's hands-on work in the galleries. And I'd love to hear a little bit more about some of the ways, we're talking about well-being, we're talking about healing, we're talking about flourishing. What are some of the ways to bring community into the museum, but also how to bring the museums out to the community? And then I love the way we already have begun to talk about the care of the folks that are within the museums. How can we create those ecosystems? And Terri, maybe I'll throw it to you.
So sure. So we currently have an exhibit called Black Woman Genius, and it is a tribute to Elizabeth Talford Scott, who is Joyce Scott's mother, who is a fiber artist. And we have all of these exhibitions of different types of fiber art, some of which are even synthetic hair, and how they have created art with synthetic hair. But at the end of the exhibit, as you are leaving the gallery, you have the opportunity to grab a scrap, because that's what quilts were made of, just scraps, and add a scrap in your way to this steel frame, and become a part of this fiber art installation. Now, I think we are working on our second steel frame since February, because it has gone over so well with young people in particular. So they go through the art and they're asked which pieces they like the most, and then at the end they can add they can add their own piece to the installation. But it's also interesting to watch older people, because they're very thoughtful in thinking about which piece of fabric do I want to use? How do I want to knot this? What am I adding to this installation? And you can tell that, yes, it can be stimulating, but it actually can also be calming. And so that's one way we are bringing people in and helping them become a part of the art. Last year we did something called, we had an Afrofuturist exhibit. And we went to a festival that we have here in Baltimore called AFRAM. I hope some of you all will come back in June for AFRAM. And at the AFRAM festival, we actually put up boards that were based on our Afrofuturistic exhibit that talked about where people saw the African American community in 50 years, and allowed people to contribute their thoughts. So that was us going outside of the museum, but taking it to the community. I don't know that people typically think about museums doing that sort of thing, but that is a part of the work that we do. The other thing I wanted to add, Susan, is that I have 2 autistic grandchildren, and I know the impact of art on humans and museums on humans by looking at my grandchildren. One of which has taken to the drums. Unfortunately, it's the drum. And he's headed to my house in a couple of weeks, and my daughter said, you gotta get him a set of drums or he's gonna be beating on everything in your house. So I said, okay, that's fine, it'll be down in the basement, we'll close him off in a room. But what happens to him when he's playing these drums? How he almost becomes one with the drums. My second autistic grandchild is nonverbal, but she loves letters, and she loves books, and she loves the movement of the pages. And most recently, she was on a field trip to a music center, actually, in Florida. And her eyes just lit up as she was going through the community and just seeing what was, being on the bus and seeing the things to see as you're on a trip to a special place. So there's no doubt to me that you've studied the science, you've got the proof, but I didn't even need the science, because I can see it when people walk through the doors of a museum, their entire countenance changes.
I think what's interesting, I always say that science is just catching up with the artist, but the problem is policy and funding, right? And making that case in a very strong way. And I think one of the things that, it's not the only thing that science is doing, because I think with autistic kids, for example, we know a lot more about this idea around social cueing and how to create comfort spaces to be able to move into that. And we can do that in lots of ways, often beginning at home and then moving into safe spaces like museums. And so it's really important to understand those dynamics. But Maria, I'd love to ask you, great, beautiful stories about the way your grandchildren are porous and taking in the arts. But in some communities that have been so marginalized, and the arts have really been, and culture have been ripped out of their daily lives. Can you talk a bit about, Maria, when you talk about cultural kitchens, how you have thought about when art hasn't been accessible?
Sure. So the concept of cultural kitchens is something I started working on many years ago, as you know, Susan. And it came out of wanting to understand how the arts were typically framed, and when we think about cities and towns and places, and wanting to offer a different way of understanding how they might matter beyond only the economic development argument. And many years ago, I was asked to write a chapter for a book that was focused on race, and at the time the language was multiculturalism, and and many of the chapters were about labor or about education, and I was writing the chapter about arts, and it occurred to me that when politicians or city leaders lift up the arts, often there is attention to those communal times when people from all parts of the city or the town come together. Imagine a table, and they're bringing what they have to offer culturally to that space. And that's wonderful that this kind of inclusivity and diversity is lifted up, and museums often have a lot to do with it. But I started thinking, how do we become good stewards of this inclusivity we aspire to and the diversity that we say we treasure? And where is it that people actually have an opportunity to make culture, in some cases to repair harm that has been done to culture? In other cases, maybe the history is not that, but where is it that people come to make sense of the world on their own terms, to ask questions, to work it out, to be creative, and actually decide or make what it is that they want to share with the rest of the world? And I thought, we need cultural kitchens. We need places where people are free to do that, where they're called to do that, and in ways that are generous, and really in thinking about part of our civic exercise, our civil society, that cultural kitchens are really important parts of healthy communities. And as a planner, I started thinking back then, how do we make sure that communities have cultural kitchens? Whose job is that? To make sure that there are these places where people can go to experience, not only experience art in a consumptive fashion, but also where they can tend to their creative lives. And with the work that has been coming out in recent years about direct connections to health and well-being, the argument begins to extend. Where can you go to care for your to develop your wellness, right? To address your wellness through that creative need.
That's not medicalized, and I think that's also really important, is that these are not things that need to be dealt with in an emergency room necessarily, right? There's some amazing programs that are doing work with people with intellectual disabilities and different kinds of cognitive issues, mental health issues. And one of the things I learned recently is that we have a very low tolerance for getting stuff done, right? Like patience. And sometimes it can take 2 years or more to find your voice when you haven't had the opportunity to really do that. And Renée, because you have such a beautiful voice, I've loved the way you've also gone around the world and talked with people. Can you share a little bit about some of the things that you hear in these community gatherings that people are lifting up, that they're wanting to know more about or have access to?
You know, I have, as I perform.
You need your mic.
Oh, wait, sorry. Right. As I perform. Yes.
I'm so jealous.
People always think that I have a loud speaking voice, and I don't.
I
So.
sing Happy Birthday with Renée sometimes.
Yes, we've had a duet.
We do duet.
But I also offer presentations to the performing arts venues where I'm performing, and I give a kind of an overview of arts and health, and they invite local scientists and healthcare providers to come and present on their work. And it's incredible what we all learn and the collaborations that have been really spawned by these gatherings. And of course, also the enlightening, I bring the audience. And so the audiences are also enlightened and passionate. We now get responses that are, what can we do? And I'm sure you get the same thing, Susan, as you go and talk. And then I was, during the pandemic, I did a webinar that's shared by the Kennedy Center and myself, kind of interviewing people. And people like Surgeon General Vivek Murthy have become wonderful spokespersons for health and wellness through the arts. And his platform has been loneliness and isolation for a long time. And I do think that making all of our performance venues and museums to some degree into community spaces is important. We need it desperately. People need it. The work that you're doing around the country, I was so inspired by the White House gathering and hearing especially ground small organizations and how they've changed, and especially been incredibly influential in messaging around projects that cities are trying to undertake. It really works to get people on board with important initiatives that are needed, including, of course, as we know, vaccination. Sing for Hope, who was here with the pianos, had phenomenal performances in Javits Center in New York City that reduced anxiety tremendously in people waiting in line. So that kind of initiative. But I learned from a palliative care expert in Georgia recently when I was doing one of these, and these kinds of gatherings, he was very impassioned, and he said, I've seen this work so well with families at the end of life. And he said, medicine treats disease. That's already a huge task for medicine, but not necessarily human beings. And so to provide these arts interventions and groups and performances and just access, the fact that a painting on the wall in someone's hospital room can reduce the length of stays by 2 days, which is also, of course, economically very beneficial to hospitals, is important. And he said he just thinks we have to treat people as an ecosystem. And your study, actually, I talk about constantly. The economic value of arts and health is so important to understand. And can you just say something about what the creation of the field means, Susan?
Sure. So this field that I mentioned, neuro arts, it's really critically important because we know a lot. There are thousands of studies about the role of arts and aesthetic experiences and nature for health, well-being, and learning. And that's great. The field is coalescing. I mentioned the Resource Center and other tools that were really lifting the field up. Maria has done amazing work. I also think small is beautiful. So all of these museums and organizations, cultural institutions, national parks I know are here, local parks are here, historic houses, living history. When you connect each of these together, we create a beautiful quilt that really is about humanity and about amplifying human potential, which at the end of the day is what we're about. We don't want to cope. We don't want to just survive. We want to thrive. And I think we've been on our knees through COVID, and I think the wind is in our face right now with so much adversity and real pain and suffering. But we persevere. That is what humanity does. That's what we've always done. And so this idea of sustainability in the neuro arts is critical. And it doesn't just come down to money, but it comes down to money, right? We all need funding, we need support, we need reliable support where we just don't have to go out and write the next grant, that we know that there's going to be this ongoing support. And it will take us some time to get there, but there's a path to get there in this country, and in other countries, they're doing it. And so there's some models to really follow. But what Renée is mentioning is, in order to try to create a case for this, the NeuroArts Blueprint has done an economic analysis starting with Alzheimer's. And so 2 years ago, we did just a very simple economic analysis saying, if music and singing was used with mild to moderate dementia patients, what would the return on investment be for the healthcare provider and for the caregiver or the care partner, which is usually a family member, so they lose work. They have mental health issues themselves. The turnover and retention in these centers is quite high because there's not enough support. The return on investment was 3 to 1, which is extraordinary. We're now doing another, something called true value, same population, but we're looking at what's the true value? Who gets divorced? Who leaves a job and never comes back? What's happening to the patient's quality of life? And we think that it's going to be as high as 10 to 1. So if you want to make a good investment, a financial investment in healthcare, you want to be paying for arts and aesthetic experiences. And this is just one example. Parkinson's and dance is another. Mental health, huge issues. So we see a lot of things happening in that space that I think is really exciting.
Can I just mention my book, which I keep forgetting to bring up?
Mind meld.
Yes, exactly, aligned. So a month ago, I released a book at Penguin Random House called Music in Mind, Harnessing the Arts for Health. And it's a snapshot of the entire field. It's an anthology with writers, researchers, even performing artists, of course, but also institutions. And it looks at childhood development. It looks at the science, the therapies, and the future. And the NeuroArts is the last chapter, I think, because it really does, this coalescence of the field really does represent the future. But for those, and the only visual art chapter in the book is by Anjan Chatterjee and Juliet King, and it's around, of course, the work that they've done with veterans, the masks, and some extraordinary work at Walter Reed. So if I had to do over again, since this took almost 3 years, but I'm working more closely with Susan now, it would be broader and probably a little more neuroarts based, but this is mainly a music snapshot show. So for those of you who have friends in music, I recommend it.
And what's interesting about this book is that you hear the impact of the arts from so many different people, and it's not the same, right? So I think that the arts and aesthetics experiences are the closest thing to personalized precision medicine that we have. So and the book really lifts that up. So we've just got a couple minutes. I wanted to lift up a topic and get your opinion, and maybe for all of us to think about this. You know, we're such a culture of data and metrics and measurement and what success looks like, right? How do you know something worked? And in this space, where we are talking about tremendous range of experiences, how do we start to think about evaluation and metrics and measurement in an ethical and important way? And Maria, I'd love to start with you.
Yeah, I was really heartened at the start of this session. One of the slides had different ways of knowing listed, and I think it's so important to be open to different ways of knowing and recognizing that the ways that we have historically understood the value of the arts, the ways that we have interrogated even impacts on health are not the only ways, and that there are valid other ways of understanding impact, and we need to be open to those. That is one of the challenges, right? Mm-hmm. Is that we make policies, we allocate resources, we make these really important decisions, based on sometimes some very limited ways of understanding things. And as we know more about the impact of the arts on humans, on society, on communities, recognizing that there are different worldviews and different ways of being accountable. I'm not saying that we shouldn't be accountable, we should, but recognizing the range of ways in which we can understand change and impact is something that we have to stay open to and build the muscle to integrate these different ways of knowing into how we make decisions, how we design programs, and similar.
Thank you. Terri, did you want to add?
I just think some data is so important, but everything that counts isn't always measurable, and everything that's measured doesn't always count. Beautiful. And I think when we think of our funding community, I would like them to better understand that, because we can create metrics, but they may not tell you what you really want to know about the impact that the space, particularly an art space, a cultural space, is having on the community. So I think in support of what Chair Jackson just said, we have to look at other ways of being able to say, this place makes a difference. Why do I know that it makes a difference? Because when people come in this space, they slow down. Yeah. They calm down. They smile. Coming from communities where they may not smile that often, or may feel like they're on guard a lot. And so those things are really important to take into account when we're looking at the impact and effectiveness of our institutions.
I always think that, we pay for what we value, but sometimes we don't value the right things. So lightning round and then we're out. I'm going to ask each of you this question. You can't say singing. What is the art form or aesthetic experience that you do to bring you back to yourself? Terri.
Well, I hate to tell people this, but I dance around the house.
Excellent, excellent. Okay, Renée.
I would say lately it is definitely being outside, just breathing that in, walking. But if outside with public art is even better.
For me, there's an outside component for sure. Being able to notice, just to be present and notice what's around me is a practice that you have to cultivate. I would say in addition to that, messing around with clay. There's something about the possibility and something about the agency that one has in the possibility of making something, which is in some ways an antidote to just a consumptive way of being. Beautiful. That balance feels important.
Beautiful. For me, it's singing, and that's really important because I can't carry a tune. So anybody around me is like, but I do it anyway, and it's really important. So I'm very proud of that. I do it nonstop. I know, this is my Achilles heel. I know every word to almost every song, and I can't carry a tune. It's really, that was what I was born into. So in closing, I want to ask each of you to think about what is it that you do? What is your art and aesthetic experience? And how often do you do it? And can you build that practice to really give you the kind of amplification that's so important to make you whole, but also to be able to move into your work? And I just want to say thank you all, and thank you to our amazing panelists. Really wonderful.
Thank you for joining us for this morning's general session and keynote presentation. We now invite you to the opening of MuseumExpo. Be sure to come back to the Expo Hall this afternoon at 12:30 p.m. for our MuseumExpo networking reception.